Hello, welcome to this presentation. In this presentation, I want to look at the concept of valuation and rates of return. So this is part one. So I have a three-part presentation. So in part one, I'll be looking at valuation and I want to focus on how we value bonds. And then I will also have another video that will look at part two. And in part two, I'll be looking at rates of return. And I want to look at the yield to maturity and other rates of return, for example, for stocks. And then in part three, I'll be looking at another valuation, but a different aspect. In this case, I'm going to look at stocks, and this I'll focus on common stock, how we value common stock, and how we value preferred stock. Now, keep in mind the presentation here is, is a continuation of what we covered before, because remember, previously we covered time value of money. And in that presentation, we did look at the how we determine the present value and the future value. The present value of a single amount and the present value of a series. In this case, we did look at annuity due and an ordinary annuity. The same thing for the future value. We did look at the future value of a single amount. Sorry. And we also did look at the future value of a series of payments, which again in this case could be an ordinary annuity or it could be annuity due. So what I'm trying to say here is that the information we learned about the time value of money, it's so critical, because then we end up using that to be able to understand the valuation aspect. So again, I said I'm going to focus more on how we value bonds. So the way we value bonds, if you think about formula, I think you have this in the text. By formula, we are talking about determining the present value of the interest payments and the present value of the principal. So what is a bond? So a bond is a financial instrument or security, and this is how it looks like. So you can have a 10-year bond or a 5-year or a 30-year bond. So let's say today is times zero. So when you buy a bond, you pay a particular price today, and then you promise so to be receiving payments. So this could be year one, year two, year three, all the way to year 10. So let's assume, for example, you buy a bond and a bond comes this way. So a bond will have a face value. Mostly bonds are sold in $1,000 denominations. So in this case, let's just assume you buy one bond for $1,000. The bond will also have a stated rate, what we call the nominal rate, or we call it the coupon rate. The coupon rate. And in this example, assume this is 10%. Those are basically the main features, but other features of a bond. And because the bond is being traded in the market, so we also need to consider what is the current market rate, or what we call the yield rate for the bond, which again, let's assume in this example, this is also 10%. So given the bond has a face value of 1,000 and the coupon rate, the return on this bond is 10%. So it's promising to pay you 10% interest. So 10% of a thousand is basically $100. So this bond, if this bond pays you interest every year, so it's promising to pay you $100, each year for 10 years, because this is again is a 10-year bond. The bond matures in 10 years. So the bond is promising you to pay you $100 every year over 10 years. And then when this bond matures, it pays back the face value. The face value of this bond is $1,000. So this bond will also pay the face value of the bond, which is $1,000. So in other words, the question we are asking ourselves here is, what is the price of this bond today? Today at time zero, what's the value of this bond? How can we value this bond? Now, this being just like any other financial instrument, the way we value financial instrument, we have to consider the stream of cash flows. We have to consider what cash flows we're going to receive from that particular investment or financial instrument. In this case, we'll be receiving $100 in terms of interest. So therefore, the present value of this bond, the value of this bond today is the present value of the future cash flows, the future benefits. The future benefits is the $100 every year, and of course the $1,000 at the time of maturity. So in this case, then the value of this bond is basically the present value of the future cash flows. So if we go back to the previous chapter, the time value of money, then we can use the time value of money concept, time value of money concept to understand how we value this. So we know that we did, again, if you look at the 100, 100, 100 each year, in this case, you're talking about the annuity payments. Okay, this is what we just did, right? And the $1,000 you're seeing here is what you're going to receive in the future in 10 years. So this is the single amount. Therefore, the the value of this bond will be the present value of the annuity payments plus the present value of the single amount. So what you'll do is to determine the present value of the annuity payments, and then we also add the present value of the single amount, which is the $1,000. In this case, our annuity is $100 and the single amount is $1,000. Again, this is why what this is representing is the present value of the annuity payments by formula, which is the $100 you're seeing all along here. And what this is representing is the present value of the principal, which is the single amount to be received in the future. That's the face value. So this represents the face value, or sometimes we call it the principal. And what I here representing is the interest payments. And the interest payments are the $100 that you're seeing here. Now, keep in mind, in terms of when it comes to determining the interest payment, so we use the coupon rate to determine the interest payment. So it's the coupon rate of the face value. This is how we arrived at the $100. But in terms of discounting this, determine the present value. Remember, we are discounting this using Y, where Y is basically the rate, but what kind of rate? It is the market rate, not the coupon rate. It's the going market rate for bonds with the similar risk in the market today. So that represents the market rate, which in this example, I'm assuming the market rate is also 10%. So in this case, it will be the same. So this is a bond where the market rate is also the same as the coupon rate. And therefore, if that is true, then the price of this bond will be the same as the face value. So in this case, if you discount all this, where you replace this with the 10%, 10%, then what you're going to find out is you'll add the present value of the annuity payments to the present value of the single amount, and you'll get this to be $1,000. And you can just go back and prove this to yourself. But the point I'm trying to demonstrate here is that the value of this bond is the present value of the future cash flows. And the future cash flows is the annuity payments and, of course, the single amount to be received in the future. And we're going to look at this as an example just to give us an idea, what we are referring to here. So here's what I just showed you in terms of looking at the present value of that bond. So the bond is promising you $100 every year for 10 years, and that in the 10th year at maturity it also pays you the face value. And therefore the present value of the annuity payments, all these annuity payments plus the present value of the $1,000, then you end up getting this to be $1,000. So the value of this bond is $1,000. And I told you that so many ways you can compute uh, the present value. Again, you can use Excel if you want to. You can use the financial calculator to determine the present value. You can use the formula as you just saw from the previous slide, and you can also use the tables. The easy one, of course, is using Excel and using the financial calculator. So let me just show you how you can solve this by using Excel. So let me get you to Excel and just show you how we can determine the present value of this bond. And then later on, I'm going to make some changes so that we can see what happens if the market rate was different. Does it change the value of the bond? So I'll show you that later on when we get there. But let me just expand this so that you can see. I only need one cell. So let's assume here we are looking at the present value of this bond. We know that the rate for this bond was, well, it's again, the market rate we said is 10%. Not the remember, this is not the coupon rate. This is the market rate. So the market rate is 10%. And the number of periods, this bond is a 10-year bond. And the payment, again, this bond is paying $100 every year. So I'll have $100 as the cash outflow. And this bond at maturity is also going to pay out the face value. So the face value is 1,000. So this bond will pay out $1,000. So, and therefore the present value of this bond is going to be $1,000. Again, just as simple as that. Again, remember here our market rate. So if you look at the market rate, it's 10%. That's what we're saying here. And the coupon rate, of course, I just want to show you this so that your coupon rate is also 10%. So the coupon rate is 10, the market rate is 10. And of course, the face value is 10. So we're going to see, I'm going to come back to this just to show you what happens if the market trend changes, either it's higher or it's lower. Does it change the value of the bond? I'm thinking you'll say probably yes, because remember, we're using the market rate. We use the market rate in what? In discounting this bond. So if the market rate changes, if this changes to anything different from 10, then it will also have an effect on what the value of the bond is going to be. So that's how we can do it. Again, just to show you by Excel, this is what you end up doing with Excel. You'll basically, again, uh, Excel, you have to key it. So what if the coupon rate was different on this bond? If the coupon rate was 13% instead of 10%, then the only thing that we're changing is the payment. Because again, remember, we use the coupon rate to determine the nature of the payment. So if the coupon rate is 13% and not 10, then of course it changes our payment. The payment then becomes 130, and therefore the present value will be 1184. We're assuming the market rate remains 10%. If the market remains the same 10%, but this bond has a different coupon rate, then of course in this regard, the present value will be 1184. Again, you can do the same thing with the calculator uh, uh, and determine again the present value. So it's just as simple as that. So let me take you back. We see what happens if the market rate was different. So if the market rate was different, so if I pull up this and assume the market rate was higher than the coupon rate. So if the market rate was, this example was 15%, how does this change the value of the bond? Again, it will be the present value of the coupon payments and of course the present value of uh, the face value. In this example, remember the present value, everything remains the same. So this will be the present value. The rate is still 10%, nothing changes. What is only changing for us is the market rate. So market rate changes, sorry, our market rate changes to 10%, 15%. So now we have 15, and the number of periods are still 10, and the payment is still 100, because remember the coupon rate remains to be 10%. So in this case, the payments does not change, which will still be 100, and the future value remains the same because this bond has a face value of 1,000. So the value of this bond is still $1,000 as the face value. So how does the value of the bond change? Again, you'll find this value is being sold for 749 today. Again, simply the market rate is higher than the face value. And what about if the market rate was lower? So if the market was, let's say, 7%, then what you'll end up seeing is a bond whose now the rate, again in this case, is 0.07, and the number of periods are still 10 years, and the payment in this is still $100, and the future value again is still 1,000. So in this regard, then the value of the bond is 1,210, which is again the present value of the future cash flows. So this bond, so we call this kind of bond, which is being sold more than the face value. So you pay 12.10 for this bond today, and the bond will promise to pay you $100 every year over 10 years, and it will pay the face value. So this is a bond that is being sold at a premium, and this is a bond that's being sold at a discount, and this is a bond that is being sold at par. Again, hope this makes sense. So what happens to the value of the bond over time? So over time, what you'll end up seeing is this. So in summary, what you'll see, I just want to show you what you'll see is this. A bond values over time. So at maturity, the value of any bond must equal its par value. If the market rate remains constant, then the value of a premium bond will decrease over time until it reaches $1,000. Remember, this is a bond that was sold at more than the face value, but if the market rate remains the same, this bond will decrease over time and will reach $1,000. And similarly, the value of a discount bond will increase over time until again it will reach $1,000. And when it comes to the par value bond, it's going to remain constant. And this basically what this graph is trying to demonstrate by showing you if the market rate is 13 and the or a 7 or 10. So we're talking about a bond that was sold more than the face value, or a bond that was sold lower at a discount, less than the face value, or a bond that was sold at par. So over 10-year life, what you end up seeing, this bond will will change over time. So the premium bond will change over time, the discount will change over time, and years to maturity, this bond will go back to the par value. And that's the demonstration that we are getting from this particular point. So again, I hope the information here helps, and I'm going to pick up on this and continue to the next segment, which I'm going to look at the required rates of return or the yield to maturity, because the question we are trying to address is why 13%? Why is the market at 7%? Or why is the market rate for this being 10%? The issue is what are the components that make up that being 13% and so on. Again, we're going to pick up that in our next segment. So I look forward and seeing you in the next segment, where we shall try to look at the yield to maturity and the required rates of return on common stock. And then later on in another series, I'm going to pick up and look at how we value common stock and preferred stock.